everybody awake now?
Amen.
If you ain't, we might lose a couple pounds tonight. Yes, ma'am, you can do it free. Amen. Yeah, she got to go home today, so praise God. Praise God. So, any other praises?
Praise God. I'm better.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Hallelujah, yeah. Give hurry.
Thank you for all your prayers.
Yeah. I know she was appreciative of all the prayers.
I have a praise.
Yes, ma'am.
Alton has made it another day.
Hallelujah, yeah.
I got praise.
Yes.
Skip, the guy came here with us last week. Well, now, the guy gave him a truck.
Okay.
All he had to do was place the clutch in it. And then, he ain't here right now because he's going to take his job.
Praise God.
Hallelujah, praise God. That's awesome.
Wow. Somebody got a truck and a job in a week.
Wow, praise God.
Wow. Praise God.
Praise God. Anybody else? I'm gonna stop this one. I know it's warm, but we can deal with it for an hour.
That's right.
I was brought up in this community, didn't have no air
You
conditioning,
know,
so y'all better deal with
I
it.
just say this, that the air conditioning tech is working on it. He'll get it as quick as he can. He's out there as we speak, so. Thomas is loving the warmth. Usually he comes in here and freezes today, so. Well, praise God. Anybody get a chance to read this past week's portions? No? Shame, shame, shame. Shame. All right, so let's see, this past week was Deuteronomy 3:23 through 7:11. Is Ve'et Haknan. Ve'et Haknan. And I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah. You're asking for something there, brother. I'm doing well to speak at once. All right, so in this part of the Torah portion, Moses is explaining how he prayed to the Lord, how he prayed not to continue being the leader, but to go ahead and cross over the river and walk, go in and see it. So I can relate right here, when he says he prayed not to be the leader. I've been down the road and I've made that prayer a few times. But it's interesting that Moses is prevented from going into the land because of his disobedience, because he didn't sanctify the name of the Father in the sight of the people. Okay, so in verse 25, we haven't got there yet, but in verse 25 of chapter 4, it tells us that he wants to see this good mountain. Many assume that this is a mountain range directly across from where he stood, but many traditions have it that it's the Temple Mount, or Mount Moriah. Okay, so Moriah is from the terms of Riyah, Yah, which means sing of Yah. Okay, so the word teacher is from the word more. That's what more means, is teacher. So, kind of interesting that the teacher wanted to go to the place of the teacher. He wanted to see the place of the teacher. Because Mount Moriah is where Yah will be our teacher. His law will come forth from Zion, from the mountain of the Lord. So, we're going to kind of stay in Deuteronomy 4. That's kind of where I'm going to put my focus. So I'm going to start from verse 1. And if I have to stop and drink water, it's because I'm standing up here pouring sweat. Okay? So it says, now therefore hearken, O Israel, to the statutes and to the judgments which I teach you, for to do them, that you may live and go in and possess the land which the kingdom, which the Lord your God, your fathers, give you. Remember last week we was talking about the kingdom, possessing the kingdom. And that's what this is all about. So he says, hearken, listen, hear, Shema. Listen to what God is telling you. That's what he's saying. So listen to the statutes. Literally, these are engraved decrees. Engraved decrees. To do them. That's the main purpose of the Shema. The main purpose of the Shema is to do the Shema. Let's put it this way. If someone is a math teacher, what good is it for a student to come into the classroom and sit there and learn and never learn how to do a math problem? Everybody understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Understand that the reason that you come is so that you can know how to do. It's not just so you can sit and learn. We don't send students to school just to sit and learn. We send them to school so hopefully they know how to do it when they're done, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the purpose of the body. Okay? So, verse 2. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it.
Amen.
That you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. So, you shall not add or subtract. That means you're not supposed to try to improve on what God has said.
That's right.
It was good when he got done with it. It don't need any improvements.
Nope.
Okay? So, to add is derived from the word yasaf, which is where we get Yosef from. Okay? But it means to augment it or add or increase it. The word diminish or subtract comes from the word garah, which means to lessen or even to scrape it off. So we're to keep, or better, we're to guard the things that he's told us. Okay? And you can't do that if somebody is adding to them or taking away from them. You can't guard what he said. So that is a tactic of the enemy, to come in and start to say, well, he meant this, or it means this. No, take it for what it says. Okay? So remember, that's how Eve got in trouble, and that's how Adam got in trouble. All right? The serpent come in and said, well, hath God said? So he's trying to take away from what God has said, and he's adding to it what he wants it to say. Right? Everybody follow what I'm saying? So the serpent is being real subtle, he's being real crafty, and when Adam eats of those words of his and partakes in them, he loses the kingdom. Yeah. So verse 3 and 4 in chapter 4. It says, your eyes have seen what the Lord did because of Baal Peor. For all the men that follow Baal Peor, the Lord thy God has destroyed them from among you. But you that did cleave to the Lord your God are alive, every one of you this day. So he's saying, because you stuck with God, you're alive. Because you didn't go off and do your own thing. So Moses associates this with adding and taking away. Think about what he's saying. This sin of Baal Peor is associated with adding and taking away. Why? Because they are mingled with the women of Midian. Do they not? So, and the Moabites. So see what's going on. They mingle, so it's equivalent to adding and taking away. So when you mingle, you compromise.
That's right.
And when you compromise, you're taking away from what God said. Okay? So Moses reminds them, you saw it. You're alive because you didn't do it, but you saw it. So keeping these commandments is what distinguishes Israel from the rest of the world. That's the whole purpose here. So, and when they come out of Egypt, understand when they came out of Egypt, they were slaves, right? So how do you think it would have looked to the world that these slaves came out of Egypt, survived the desert, multiplied in the desert, and would have come into the land and would have rose to prominence in the earth? How do you think the nations would have seen that? They would have seen God's light all over them. Okay, but That was the purpose of Israel, was to be a light to the world.
Yes.
Okay? The nations would have had to have acknowledged God's wisdom and His understanding because they had the commandments, the wisdom of God. That is our wisdom, folks. Proverbs 2:1-9 says this, "My son, if you will receive my words and hide my commandments with you, so that you incline your ear unto wisdom, and apply thy heart to understanding, yea, if you will cry after knowledge, lift up thy voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver, and search for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. Out of His mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He lays up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is the buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keeps the paths of judgment, and He preserves the way of His saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness, judgment, and equity, yea, every good path." So, according to Psalms, the steps of a good man are ordered of the Lord, correct? So understand the steps of a good man have already been determined by God's Word. Verse 5-8, "Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do in the land where you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them. This is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes, and say, Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great? Who hath God so near unto them? As the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon Him for. And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all of this law, which I've said before you this day?" So Moses is pointing out that no other nation has laws like this. Moses is pointing out that this is God's righteousness. Okay? And He is just in this. All right. Verse 9-13. "Only take heed to yourself and keep thy soul diligent, lest you forget the things which thy eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life. But teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons, especially the day that thou stoodest before the Lord thy God in Horeb, when the Lord said unto me, Gather me the people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children. And you came near and stood under the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire in the midst of heaven, with darkness and clouds and thick darkness. And the Lord spoke unto you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the voice of the words, but saw no similitude, only you heard a voice. And He declared unto you His covenant, which He commanded you to perform, even 10 commandments. And He wrote them upon two tables of stone. So what's He saying here? Keep your soul diligently. So Moses is telling Israel their survival is dependent upon the instructions that they're being given. Remembering what they saw. Remembering what they saw. So Moses is recounting, if you will, what took place at Mount Sinai. Okay? Describing what they saw. So the mountain was on fire. Man, there was smoke and there was darkness. They saw it. Okay? And the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. And you heard the sound of the words, but saw no form, only a voice. So the wording from this verse and from Exodus chapter 20 is where the tradition comes from concerning the events at Mount Sinai, because God's voice, according to what I can see in the Hebrew language, God's voice was divided into flames of fire. Okay, and it became visible to those that were assembled there. Well, that's what we see in Acts chapter 2. There comes flaming tongues of fire that become visible to the people that are assembled. Everybody with me?
Yep, man.
Okay. So this is to emphasize that God was giving them a covenant of fire. So, and that covenant of fire is engraved in stone. But now this is talked about in the very first word of Genesis chapter 1, Bereshit. If you study out the word, you'll find a covenant of fire within that word. So later this is to be inscribed upon our hearts. Okay. So he says, take heed to yourself, right? So verse 14 through 16, the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments that you might do them in the land where you go to possess it. Take you therefore good heed to yourselves, for you saw no similitude on the day that the Lord spoke to you in the Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you corrupt yourselves and you make graven images, and the similitude of any figure, the likeness of male or female. Now, since they saw no form, they didn't see God, they're not supposed to make any graven images unto God. So, this is where they got in trouble with the golden calf. Now they wanted something to symbolize God. Well, this is how we get in trouble. We want something that symbolizes God. But God is beyond description. So he says, don't make anything. I don't want you to use anything to worship me. That's what he's saying. I don't want you to use anything to worship me. I don't want you to put a tool to anything and have it symbolize anything. I don't want you to do that. I just want you to worship me. Period. So it stipulates no images, male or female, and verse 19, the likeness of any beast, 17 through 19, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged fowl that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the waters beneath the earth, and least thou lift up thine eyes to heaven, when thou seest the sun, and the moon, and the stars, and the host of heaven, should be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. So what he's saying here, at least you lift up your eyes and be drawn away to the host of heaven. So the sun, the moon, the stars. Well, we got a lot of people that worship that stuff. I mean, a lot of people live by horoscopes and all this kind of stuff. But they use the luminaries or the planets and the stars as symbols of deities. This is where we get a lot of the Greek mythology from. Okay? So, and be drawn away, in other words, lured away by the magnificence of their brightness. Okay? So people, folks, are generally attracted to two things: brightness and smooth speech. And that's the way the enemy always hunts. Okay? So, which the Lord, he says, which the Lord has divided or allotted to the peoples over the whole heaven. Now, some people interpret this to mean that he give the nations this to enjoy the light or heat. And this was their only source of light. Okay? So, but not for Israel. Not for Israel. Israel had the light of God. Right? So, Isaiah 60 verse 19 says this: the sun shall no longer be your light by day, nor the brightness shall the moon give light to you, but the Lord will be to you an everlasting light, and your God, your glory. So we know when there's a new heaven and a new earth, that we're not going to have the sun, the moon, and the stars like this. That he will be the light of the city. Okay? So remember, Israel receives their light from the Creator so that they can be a light. They can't generate their own light. Like the moon, they can't generate its own light. They rely upon the sun, if you will, to illuminate everything else. So the sun illuminates the moon. The moon represents Israel. The sun represents the sun. So, think about this. In John chapter 1, verse 4 and 5, it says, in him was life, and the light was the light of men, and the light shined in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. So the light came, this light that's being spoken of came before the sun, the moon, and stars were ever placed in the heavens. Okay? So the sages believe this. I don't know if this is true, but this is what they believe. They believe that God allowed the heathens to worship the sun, the moon, and stars as a stepping stone to bring them to a higher state of belief. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it is true that many of us grew up believing certain things that weren't true. Okay? And it's brought us to a certain point. Okay? So, yet, those things and beliefs served as a role for us today. They served as a stepping stone for us. Okay? So, the sages differentiate that of what was given to Israel, which was first-hand knowledge of God. All right? So, Israel was called to be His people. Israel will always be His people. Yet there is only one way that leads to life, right? Which is why Israel had the mandate of being a light to the nations. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So Isaiah 42, verse 5 through 7 says this. Thus says God, the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, spread forth the earth, and that which comes from it, who gave breath to the people on it, and the Spirit to those who walk on it. The Lord hath called you in righteousness, and will hold your hand. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles, to open blind eyes, to bring out of prisoners from the prison, those who sit in darkness from the prison house. So ultimately, folks, that's speaking of the Messiah. But whatever's true for Messiah is also true for the body of Messiah. Israel is called to be a light to those nations. Those that sit in darkness, those that are blind. Darkness is those that are blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both fall in the ditch. Isn't that what Scripture says? So there has to be light in order to shine so people can see how to walk. I know I'm jumping around, but Romans chapter 1, verse 20 through 25, it says this, for ever since the creation of the universe, His invisible qualities, both His eternal power and His divine nature, have been clearly seen, because they can be understood from what He has made. Therefore, they have no excuse, because although they know who God is, they do not glorify Him as God or think Him. On the contrary, they have become futile in their thinking, and their undiscerning hearts have become darkened. Claiming to be wise, they become fools. In fact, they have exchanged the glory of the immortal God for mere images, like the mortal human being, or like birds or animals or reptiles. This is why God has given them to the vileness of their hearts, the lust, and to the shameful misuse of each other's bodies. They have exchanged the truth of God for falsehood by worshiping and serving created things rather than the Creator. Praise be to Him forever. See, it's understood that they did it, but they did it in contradiction to what they knew to be true. So I'm going to suggest that part of what the sages believe, I don't believe is true. So Israel is called to be the nation because they are the light of God's eyes. Deuteronomy 4:20 says, but the Lord hath taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, even out of Egypt, to be unto Him a people of inheritance, as you are this day. So that's accentuated to me by the fact that He took Israel out of an iron furnace. He calls Egypt an iron furnace. Now that's let me see if I can say this term correctly. Crucible, an iron crucible is what it's called. That which is used to purify gold and to purge foreign matter from that gold. That's what that word means. So the Hebrew word furnace for kur is kur, and it means to purify, repair, and correct. So He puts us into the fires to purify. So it's related to something that is dug out as a pit or a cistern, okay? And it's implied to serve as a furnace. So It's interesting that Joseph was thrown into the pit so that he would go into Egypt. So Egypt is intense suffering intended to purge them of their instincts of rebellion. So Egypt and Pharaoh serve as a purpose to ready Israel to conform to God when they come out. Does that make sense?
Break their will.
Still, the purpose is to ready the people to distinguish God's way from Egypt's way. God's way from the way of the world. To show the world that God's way works.
Right.
But they refused. So Israel, he says, is the people of inheritance. It's this call and this responsibility that stands for all time. People, Israel is the inheritance. They have the inheritance. Nobody else in the world has the inheritance. Israel has the inheritance. Why? If you're Messiahs, you're the seed of Messiah, and you are heirs according to the promise, according to Galatians 3:16 and 3:29, I think. So understand what we're called to be. So the context of all this is Israel's mandate will never change. They're always going to be called to be the light to the world. Okay? So Ezekiel 20, verse 32 through 33 says this. What you have in mind shall never be when you say we will be like the Gentiles, like the families of other countries, serving wood and stone. As I live, says the Lord, surely, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with fury poured out, I'll rule over you. So in other words, you're not going to live like the nations. If you do, if you try to, I'm going to scatter you. I'm going to put you in the nations so you don't want to live like the nations. Okay? So from the furnace, that is from the trials, from the pressure, is there for a purpose. In Egypt, the problem is they had mingled with the culture. Okay? And so it will be at the end of the days, which is where we are now. We've mingled with the culture so much that you can't tell us between us and the world. That's one of the problems that we're having today. Because people say, well, I can do it however I want to do it. Just like they did when they were in Egypt. I can worship how I want to worship. That's right. So, remember what he said to Laodicea, which is a mixed congregation. What's he say? I counsel you to buy of me gold that's refined in the fire, that you may be rich, white garments that you may be clothed, that your shame of your nakedness not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve so that you can see. Okay, as many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore be zealous and repent. So, all through this, he constantly says, repent. Go back to the way I told you to do it. So, remember the three boys at the fiery furnace. They wasn't going to bow and do it a different way. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, King, I know you can kill us, but hey, we're not going to worship you. So, the furnace was heated 7 times hotter, wasn't it? So, interesting. God's word is purified 7 times, according to Psalms chapter 12, verse 6. So, God's people of inheritance are promised He will never forsake them. He'll never forsake the covenant. Okay? For the Lord will not forsake His people for His great name's sake, because it has pleased the Lord to make you His people. He'll not forsake the covenant no matter what. Not because of who you are, but because of what He's done. Understand? He gave His word. So, He says in Isaiah chapter 48, verse 10, Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. So, verse 21 and 22, Deuteronomy 4. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me for your sakes, and swore that I would not go over the Jordan, and that I should not go unto the good land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. But I must die in this land. I must not go over the Jordan, but you shall go over and possess the good land. So Moses, as we know, is forbidden to go over the Jordan for the punishment of what he did, smacking the rock. So we can learn from this that Moses, I want everybody to catch this, Moses led them through the wilderness, but it's Joshua that leads them into the land. Everybody on board. So what we see here is Moses, who represents the law, leads them through the desert or the world, but it's Joshua or Yehoshua, which is grace, that leads them into the land. You are saved by grace through faith. Everybody get that?
Yes.
See, you're not saved by keeping the commandments. You walk through the world keeping the commandments, being a light to the world, so that by grace you enter into the land. So this shows us the correlation of how the law and grace work hand in hand. That they operate in harmony with each other and are not at odds with each other.
Right.
Everybody understand?
Yes.
I remember hearing long eons ago that, and now I see why you said, that God had wanted to keep Moses from going into the Holy Land with them, to keep them from making him into a god.
Yes.
Because
And they
they
would have.
already had made a bull, and they already had the non-Messianic Jews, the just regular Jews. Orthodox Jews kind of hold Moses up here as
But
the dude.
I believe,
So-
God knew that they would build shrines and memorials and statues and all this stuff to Moses.
Yeah,
And they would begin to worship Moses.
yeah, see, that's what I
Yeah.
heard.
And I agree with that, yes. So anyways, verse 22 says, I must die in this land. So this is what Rashi had to say about this. He said, not even my bones will be carried over the Jordan to be laid to rest in the sacred soil, as will happen with the bones of Joseph. Now, this is what the Talmud says, and I don't agree with this. I'm just going to give it to you. The Talmudic reason given for this statement is because Joseph always acknowledged himself as a Hebrew and Moses didn't. I don't buy that. Okay? But both of them came out of Egypt. Both of them transversed the wilderness. One was alive and one was dead. Yet at the crossing, one died and the other was resurrected. Joshua is a seed of Joseph. He is Ephraim. He's a seed of Ephraim. He's a seed of Joseph. You understand what I'm saying? So the old man dies and one is resurrected when he comes to Christ. So, yet, the result is Moses is hidden, folks. He's hidden from the people. He's hidden from view. The Jews accept who he is, even though they can't see him anymore. They didn't see him after that generation anymore. They accept him. They believe his words even though they can't see him. So likewise, they believe in the coming of Elijah, right? Though they can't see him either. He was taken up, right? So isn't it interesting that those are the two that appeared to the Messiah on the Mount of Transfiguration? and that Moses comes from Levi and Elijah comes from the inhabitants of Gilead, which is a descendant of Joseph, Ephraim. And they represent the two witnesses, symbolizing both in Messiah, who is the one who is not seen, but yet they will not believe. So there are those who are of the natural seed and those who are of the wild seed. Okay? There are those who are of the natural Israel who act like the nations, act like the world. And there are those of the nations who strive to behave as the seed of Abraham. So, in the end, all of us have got to be grafted into the Messiah. Okay. And we'll have to acknowledge who and what we are and behave accordingly. Verse 23 and 24, Deuteronomy 4. Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make a graven image or a likeness of anything, which the Lord thy God has forbidden you. For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, and even a jealous God. So take heed. So remember, Moses is telling them, look, I made a mistake and I can't go. Take this from Moses' perspective. I messed up and I can't go in. Take heed to yourselves that when you get over there, you don't start doing stuff that you shouldn't do, because he'll kick you out. That's what he's saying. So in other words, Israel, don't play, God don't play favorites. What's he saying? What's Paul saying in Romans chapter 11? If he cut off the natural branch, what makes you think he won't cut you off? So he's a devouring fire. He's a consuming fire, which is both positive and negative. Okay? So he's a jealous God. He doesn't allow the loyalties that are due to him to be given to anything or anyone else. He just doesn't allow it. That's why he does not want something used to worship him. The cultures of Greece and Rome and all the rest of them, well, their gods weren't jealous as long as you paid homage to them once in a while. It was okay to worship Zeus and worship Jupiter, and, that didn't matter. That was fine. You pay your temple tax for this one and your temple tax for that one, they didn't care. Them gods were fine with all of that. So, when Jerusalem fell, remember, Rome was prepared to give the God of Israel a place in their nation, in their pantheon. All right. So, folks, truth can't make concessions to falsehood. It can't compromise it. It can't tolerate it. That's the part of this that I hope everybody walks away and understands. That to do so would be to surrender. And once you surrender, there's no stopping. Look at our nation today. Many years ago, the body of Christ said, well, we'll kind of let this go and we won't say anything. And from there it snowballs. The government done the same thing. And what once was little has now become huge. What started out as a small sin has become an abomination before the Lord. So culture seeds a belief in God as long as it remains where it's supposed to be. Right? Everybody agree? I mean, you can worship God. Just don't say that word, Yeshua or Jesus. Don't say that word. But you can worship God. That's fine. Because now you're not being specific. So, for example, there's this thing in the so-called thing in the Constitution called the separation of church and state. Anybody ever heard of that? And no, it's not in the Constitution, but everybody swears it is. Yeah. So, in that, we have to allow for other gods, other views, other beliefs. That's where it comes from. See, they take it one thing, took the very words and used them against us.
It was a letter.
It was a letter to the Dansbury Baptist Association by Thomas Jefferson. But from those words, they turned those words and used them against the body of Christ. So we can't just be tolerant of every old thing that comes down the pipe. So remember, God's a jealous God. He's not going to go along with other things in your life. Okay? So, all right. So some people contend that it should go beyond that, saying that we have a responsibility to teach false gods and false ideas. We have a responsibility. I say no. I agree to a point by not pointing fingers. And what I mean by that, there's a way to do things without beating people over top of the head. However, you still have to say what's true. So we have to be mindful and be very careful and allow God to lead us and guide us when we do those things. So, see, I see God working and manifesting in our life. If we have Him working in our lives, I believe people will see that, and that will be a draw to people. But by simply running around beating people over top of the head with a Bible, I mean, that's never worked. It's never worked. The way to draw people to the Messiah is for them to see the Messiah in you.
Amen.
And if they see Him in you, they're going to say, man, what is it about you? How is it that you're so blessed? I mean, they're going to see those things. So, if someone witnesses truth, folks, then they can discern what is false. Everybody with me? So, he that hath my commandments and keeps them is he that loves me. And he that loves me shall be loved by the Father, and I will love him and will manifest myself to him. According to John 14:21. So some hear the truth and they believe, and they discern the falsehoods. And there are times, folks, to break things down. There's times to break down the idols, and there's times to simply let things go. You have to discern what you're supposed to do in this situation. Just as Paul did at Mars Hill. Instead of beating down all the other idols, he just decided to tell them about the one true God, which there was no idol for. Okay. Verse 25. When you shall beget children and children's children, and you shall have remained long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves, and make a graven image or a likeness of anything, and shall do evil in the sight of the Lord your God to provoke him to anger. So Moses is telling them that after you've been there for a while, you're going to abandon the truth. You're just going to walk away from it. He's already telling them what's going to happen. So he's not saying when you do or if you do. He's saying when you do this. Not if you do it. He's saying when you do it, because you're going to do it. So in verse 26 he says, heaven and earth will be a witness against them, and you'll be exiled from the land. Okay? So you'll be scattered. So they were, think about this, they were already being scattered before they got into the land. God already had intention to sow them back into the nation. Just like seed. So the reason for this, teach your children and your children's children. Why? So that they won't be susceptible to step into things that they shouldn't. That's what it's all, this is what it's talking about. You go from here, you go through chapter 5, chapter 6, it consistently says, teach your children and your children's children. And when they ask about certain things, you know, it says this throughout Scripture, when they ask about these certain things, that you tell them what actually took place. You tell them and you get them to understand what has transpired, why you are where you are. Okay? So that later generations won't walk away. Because this generation that's going in, they'll be okay. But in a couple generations, they'll start to walk away. Okay? So, why? Because they forget who they are. they forget because they didn't see it firsthand, right? Okay, so it simply becomes ancient history. Ancient history to them, and it doesn't mean a thing. All right, just as it is here in our nation with this last generation that's coming up, the last couple of generations. It doesn't mean our history means nothing to them. They don't know our history. They've forgotten the Revolutionary War. They've forgotten the Civil War. They have no idea why these things were fought. They can't even hardly tell you why World War I and World War II was fought. They don't know anything about fascism, socialism, or any of those communism. They don't know anything about it because they don't care. It's ancient history to them. They believe what they can see. So,
And my daughter's here, my two granddaughters, this much, and they said the whole 4 years. Actually, it's go to college. She said the whole 4 years, that's parents. It's the stuff that was taught every year, over and over and over. She said, we didn't learn anything, we just learned their agenda that they had. She said, I feel like I wasn't ready to go to college because I didn't have the material that I needed. I was taught all this junk. The tourniquets, the government tourniquets, my parents.
but see, I'm just going to say this, and I say this with all due respect. The generations that are like it is because of us. We didn't do our job. We didn't do our job. We didn't teach our children the way we should have taught them. We didn't teach them to respect the things that they should respect. Why? Because I just have to say this, because we want our children to have better than what we had. How many times, I don't know how many times I said something like that. And we poured all this prosperity upon them. And prosperity dulls the senses. That's what happened to Israel. They went into the land flowing with milk and honey, and they become dull and numb to God because they were so prosperous. Now, verse 25, where it says you shall have been long in the land, is literally saying you shall grow stale in the land. So Yeshua referred to this in the last days. He said in Matthew 24, 4 through 12, and I'm going to close it out here. And Jesus answered, said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and deceive many. And you shall hear wars, rumors of wars. Be not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places. And all these things are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, shall hate one another, and many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. Because, I want everybody to catch this, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall grow cold, or wax cold. The reason all of these things happen, the reason these things are happening now in our nation, is because iniquity is lawlessness. And because lawlessness abounds, the love of many will grow cold. Lawlessness is understood in Scripture to be those without God's commandments or without Torah. Okay? So that causes people to grow cold, to grow stale. And I'm almost done. I'll get a couple lines left. So they begin to grow cool, and then they get cold. The reason for all that is people have forgotten. They've forgotten who they are. They've forgotten what their call is. Even in the body of Christ, we have debates going on about whether this should be allowed, or this should be allowed, or this should be allowed. We have forgotten who we are and who we serve. And that, folks, is why we find the world around us in the shape that it's in, because there's no light in the midst of the darkness. So their call was to love the Lord their God with all their heart, all their soul, and all their strength. And let us not forget that call and fall into the exact same trap that all these other people do, because if they can fall in, be careful because you can too.
Yeah, in the next sentence, it says, and have these words which I command you this day in your heart, so that can have on your heart.
That's right.
And I don't think it's true. I'm just not telling you that.
So I hope you get something from it. I'm not going to preach from any chapter in there, but that just kind of resonated with me. And I think that's what people need to be mindful of today, more than anything else. And I know I sound like I beat a dead horse, and I probably do. But folks, without faith, which is walking out the commandments of God, grace doesn't exist. Because there were those that died in the wilderness that didn't make it to the Jordan. And what's it say in the New Testament? Because they had no faith. That's New Testament words, not mine. They refused to believe God. So understand that we have a responsibility in this wilderness that we're walking in to walk by faith so that grace will carry us through. Amen? All right, let's pray for you.
Another thing too, though, about the prosperity message of that day. The Hebrew is not richness in money and prosperity. Prosperity in Hebrew, I understand, means your journey.
The actual translation in Hebrew for prosperity is talking about being prosperous in the Word of God. It has very little. If we seek Him first, then all these things will be added unto us. So these are the things that we need to get to match up in the Scriptures so that people understand how to actually work this thing out or walk it out. That's right. No, most people don't. And it's because of unbelief. So, all right, I'll stop preaching this. I know it's hot in here and I'm sweating bad. All right, you see on the day that you gave yourself up for us, you took the bread and you broke it and you blessed the Most High. And you said, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, v'motzi level min haveres. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth the bread from the earth. Amen. Amen. That's it. Okay. Then you took the cup, and you blessed the Most High, and you drank, and you said, for this is the blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. When we do this each time that we come together, we do this. We do this in remembrance of you, the blood that you poured out for each and every one of us. We thank you. We thank you for your sacrifice. That you exchanged your life for mine. And I thank you. Please do your
Peggy, Shabbat Shalom. Boy, it's hot back there.
Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the food and life. Amen.
Yeah, I didn't forget you. Shabbat Shalom.
Father, we just love you. We thank you for all that you've given us this week. Father, we look forward to being at rest and listening to your voice. Allow your word to penetrate our hearts and our minds. That you can give us clear instruction of what you would have us to do this coming week. What you would have us to walk out, the people that you would have us to meet, and the words that you would have us to give. And And Father, we will turn to give you all the praise, all the glory, and all the honor. So Yeshua's name that we pray, amen.